coloring for all of this. From the coloring we were able to, so all this was done last time, there we were able to extract a labeling. So, okay, there exists a thing for all such that as properly colored. Now, from here we were able to, what was the statement of this thing? I think it was all of this. Corollary or someone earlier statement, I think it was. Yeah. Yes. So, okay. So, this is the, there exists, we have, or this is that barycentric subdivision. Okay. So, with respect to all of that, there is a coloring, and from there, there is a, we can define a Sperner's labeling on the vertices of gamma, not gamma, what is it, delta, on vertices of, okay, yeah, and this and subdivision. Okay. So, this is what this picture is. So, we started off with this simplex. It is a convex hull on these standard basis vectors. So, what that means is any point inside this object must have this property. It has, let us say, has coordinates x1 to xn, the summation of these xi's will be equal to 1. Okay. Now, okay. So, I drew it this way, did not want to draw sort of this 90 degree sort of axis, this is easier. So, this is basically the point represented by, would be generated by the vector E1, and everything else would be set to 0, right. Okay. So, this is the other vector, this is the one corresponding to E2, and this is the E3. Okay. So, all the points here are encased within the convex hull created by these 3 vectors. This is obviously n equal to 3 case. Okay. Now, so let me just write the property of the Sperner's labeling. Okay. So, this is the colored, it is basically the color, let us just be more precise instead of saying this. There is a proper coloring on G, this thing on this graph, this. Okay. From there we can create from there. Okay. Yes, yes. Okay, so that's the thing. So, it's a combination of bunch of results. So, this there exists a way of creating a subdivision where the diameter. So, because we can go on smaller and smaller and smaller. So, that much is okay. So, what I need to start the proof where we basically stopped was where this was the labeling, and from the proper labeling there exists a simplex, in this case a triangle, where it is fully tricolored, and from there we create the partition on the cake, because that is the goal, right, that I have to partition the cake, which is, let us actually draw this as 0 1. Okay. That is the part. Okay. So, there There's a proper color using, yeah, okay, using n colors, n plus 1 colors, okay. N colors here. This is a n minus 1 simplex and this is, yeah, n colors, okay. We need as many colors as there are players. Okay. So, now from here okay, fine. Okay, this is where we stopped. Okay. Now, we will define from here we start. Okay. So, from this proper coloring. So, what does proper coloring actually mean in terms of the simplex? The graph, you remember this graph consists of the 1 faces of the underlying simplex. The edges of this graph was, okay, of, okay. So, this is what this is. Now, from here we will create the Sperner's labeling. So, suppose I am going to just assume without loss of generality, it is just a lot of indexing. So, the color on Vi is actually color I. Okay. In this case, Vi is this object. Don't want. Oh, I didn't actually define. Okay. So, with respect to partition, these are lots of. So, I am going to partition the cake which is between 0 and 1 with respect to this object. Okay. So, B1x is nothing but the interval from 0 to x1. Bix or rather Bkx is the interval, kth interval in this iteratively defined object x I summation of. So, let us say, okay, we are doing, suppose here n equal to, I am just going to do n equal to 3, okay, because that is what the example is about. So, here k is number of players. Okay. So, this portion, this length is x1, this length is x2, okay, and this is x3. Okay. Agreed? All right. This, so the goal is to basically to prove this epsilon, I need to create a partition of this object, so that each of these chunks is given to somebody, one of the 3 players, and so that they are epsilon NV free. Okay. Now, so keep this sort of partition in mind. So, every partition, every point basically describes a partition. Okay. So, now the question is who gets what, that is the goal, and that is the part that we will use Sperner's to sort of guide us. Okay. 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 Anything else I need to say? Okay. Suppose, okay, color of this vertex is j. we know that there exists a coloring, proper coloring. So, every vertex has, I mean, I see a vertex, I see this coloring and I infer what the coloring is. Okay. So, now I am going to do this labeling as I have done it this way, but I am going to label this vertex, okay, as the argmax of, I will explain what this is. I need to learn to write small actually, it's running out of board space. Okay. Mu J, yeah. So, I am saying that the vertex x is colored j. From the j agent's perspective, I am going to see how much he likes each of these partitions. Okay. That is it, that is the only person whose perspective I am caring about. So, j is fixed, j is that color. What am I doing argmax over is basically is it the piece 1, piece 2, piece 3, that is the point. Okay. So, this is what will define the labeling of a point. It is defined with respect to the coloring and this type of partitioning. Okay. So, this is the, okay. All right. This is also I think we covered last time and so on. Okay. So, claim is this is a this function L is a valid Sperner coloring. Sperner, let us not say coloring, let us call it labeling. So, you remember Sperner labeling was you take a simplex, suppose it is an n simplex, then you would use n plus 1 colors. This is an n minus 1 simplex, so you are going to use n colors, okay, sum 1 to n. Now, the point is whenever you look at a sub simplex, whenever you look at within a subdivision, the colors that you are allowed to use must be, so project the entire coloring onto a sub simplex, okay, and the coloring that you are using there must respect the like the high this sort of a bigger coloring, like the coloring from which you have sort of so the whole thing is colored. So, let me give this example. So, this is colored, okay. So, this is labeled. So, notice something, by this example this is the point 1 0 0, okay. So, it means what, x1 is 1, x2 is 0, x3 is 0. So, if I look at these chunks like this, for this vertex here only the first slice has non-zero value, slice 2, slice 3 has 0 value, correct. So, naturally the labeling when I look at this vertex, okay, suppose it is colored something, correct, it whatever the person's color is, because his coordinates are 0 for the other two, the label has to be 1. This is the definition, right. When I whatever the color here is j, red, blue, yellow, whatever the color is, j, when I define this object, right, that bk, b2 and b3 will be 0, because this interval, these intervals are 0, right. So, only mu j of b1 can be non-zero, therefore, the label of this vertex is 1. Similarly, same argument here, no matter what color you give this vertex, the labeling of this vertex has to be 2, because the other slices has no value for this guy, right, because this is x1 is 0 here and x3 is 0. So, x1 is the first slice, it has value 0, between x1 and x2 it has some non-zero slice, non-zero value, it is the only thing, and again x3 becomes 0. So, his label will have to be 2. This guy's label is 3, correct, no matter what who the color, what color you give this, has to be the label. Okay. A Sperner labeling it's a valid Sperner labeling when you have labeled the vertex in a way such that everything here in this face, this whole one line, this base line is also a simplex, right. It is a one face of the bigger simplex, right. It means that these people must be colored by the two labeled by the two labels that are used to describe label this and this. So, this is why these intermediate vertices can only take labels between 1 and 2. Okay. Similarly, over here the vertices that fall on this one face can only take labels, this is 1 and this is 3. So, 1 and 3. Okay. This kind of labeling where you have a labeling over the simplex and every subsimplex. So, the definition was on this thing, I have to write again this thing. So, it has to be a proper labeling using the subset of colors on each subsimplex and within each subdivision. Okay. So, this is label 1, suppose this is label 1, okay. This is say label 3 if this were the case. Okay. So, anything, suppose this is something. Okay. In this case 1, suppose this is 1, 1, 3, right, 3. Okay. Suppose the labeling in these things are this can have label 1, this can also have label 1. This is suppose label 3, this is label 3 and also this is label 3. Okay. Then all the vertices inside this must only use labels 1 and 3. Okay. Because how did I get these smaller triangles? By subdividing this triangle and this triangle, right. So, that is the thing. Yeah. So, which triangle you are saying? This triangle you are pointing to, right? Yeah. So, the barycenters of this triangle along this face is this, along this face is this, along this face is this, and this is the center barycenter of the triangle.
That should be labeled 3 because the endpoints are 3.
This one should be 3 because all of them are 3. Okay. If this is also 3, then yes, right. No, but this is 1, right. So, it could take 1 or 3. So, now if you also had the thing 2 and so on, then there could be more possibilities of color. Okay. So, that is the idea. Okay. So, now okay. So, this is not hard to see why if I label this way using this principle I am labeling, then also I will get a valid labeling. You basically have to see within a subsimplex, you take any line, you know that okay, this is the labeling of the outside vertices, if within the barycentric subdivision what are the vertices and then what kind of labeling must they get if I follow this rule, and then you will see that okay, they should not be able to go out of this. Okay. All right. So, suppose this is a valid Sperner's labeling. Okay. This now applying Sperner's lemma, I am taking too much time. There exists fully labeled, which basically means simplex in this thing. Okay. Call it now a smaller delta star. Okay. It means there is a tricolored triangle. When my simplex is a triangle, it means there is a tricolored triangle. Okay. So, let us see maybe, okay, then let me just color this pink, okay, so that I can see all the 3 colors represented here. No? Okay. This is pink. Huh? Sorry, this is the labeling. Okay, I am using the word labeling and this thing, but please do not get confused. As of now, we are only talking about the labeling. Okay, we will. So, suppose I need, let us say this is also. I think this is allowed. yeah, this is the barycentric this thing, okay. Yeah, this is the this is okay. Can I transfer this to basically trying to find a and this is green. Again the green chalk has fallen. Losing chalk this way. This is allowed, no? This is basically the tricolored triangle. Okay, all right. So there is a triangle. There exists a let's call it multicolored simplex. This is the n-1 simplex. So this is this, okay, and this is defined. Its base points are V1 to Vn. Okay. So far so good. Okay. Now here is the main thing that was probably okay. Without loss of generality, we assume that the color associated with the point V1 is 1, with 1 with 2 it is 2, and so on and so forth. This is just a matter of indexing, nothing more. Now using, because this property holds, the labeling tells me what? When I split the cake from the perspective of the vertex V1, the labeling from the perspective of V1, because at that time I am looking at V1, the labeling associated would be this kind, the favorite piece of vertex V1 from the sort of, this is the utility value, this is the sort of the utility value, right. So the slice that gives highest utility to player V1.
So it's like most favorite piece in the slicing velocity.
Yes, V1. Similarly, when I do it with respect to V2, I will get the labeling with respect to the favorite, I will get the label which corresponds to the favorite slice with respect to V2 and so on, okay. All right. See, so let us start with a this thing. Suppose I say I am going to give player 1 his favorite slice, I am going to give player 2 his favorite slice, and player 3 and so on. What is wrong with this? Is this a correct way of, I mean, would this lead to a partition? That is the first and foremost. Whether it is NV free or epsilon NV free or not, that is a second matter. Question is, it is a partition. Question: can I assign slice Vi to player I? What? Tell me.
We are not sure, like those are different vertices.
Vertices matlab? So suppose V1 is this guy, suppose this is the case. So he definitely gets this space, correct? Correct? Suppose V1 is this person, if this is V1, right? So he will definitely get this because he can't, he has no preference for any other place, right? So he gets this space. Now the question is V2's coordinates, let me write it this way, x1 2, x2 2, right? This 2 means this coordinate, okay? x3 2, okay? Okay. I do not know, all I know is they add up to this value 1 because they are within the convex hull, but I do not know what these precise values are. Maybe when I look at V2's labeling, it is pointing to his favorite slice overlaps with this slice. Okay. Oh, is it not? So when I apply the labeling with respect to V2, L of V2 is pointing to some slice, correct?
It might be the first.
Yes, suppose no, it might it could still be his second slice. The problem is his second slice, because these x2 to these values are different. His second slice could actually start from somewhere here, and therefore I am basically giving two people a slice, two slices where there is an overlap. That is the problem, correct? Here this is not going to happen, between this and this guy it is not going to happen. His favorite slice, this guy, it is 1 0 0, right? His favorite slices, actually, okay, this is a bad example. His favorite slices, the whole thing is this thing. Okay, this is a bad, this is not a good example to talk about. Let us say, yes, I should have had an example ready, but okay, let us just see. Okay, x set b1 is this 1, x1 2. This is the coordinate, and V2 is x. This is just, I have written the coordinates. Okay. Suppose V1 does have color 1, right, by our assumption. So, color 1 means it is owned by player 1. So, player 1 gets to decide how this vertex will partition. Okay. So, suppose player 1 says I like the first partition, this vertex is owned by player 2. He says, well, I like the second slice. Okay. The values are such that he prefers the second slice. Okay. So, second slice basically means wherever this one ends, x2 length after that, correct? Okay. Problem is, I do not know, maybe x11 is greater than x22. So, from the first player's perspective, he is saying give me this piece, right. Player 2 is saying, and say I should say this. This is the player 2's cutting of the cake. Okay. Everybody starts with 0. This is the So, this purple is the cake piece that player 2 wants, this green part is the piece that player 1 wants. The problem is there is this common piece. So, this is why both of them can't simultaneously get their favorite piece. Okay. So, this is the issue. If I can't get, why I can't just give this, just looking at player i's favorite slice and give it to them. Now, what I am going to do is, I am basically going to do the slicing purely from the perspective of the player 1. Okay. So, this is from player, so this means this is. So, player 1 has three slices which he labels as whatever he wants, right. So, L of V1 decides which he likes. Okay. Of player 1, let me write P1. The answer is no. Now, player 2 gets this slice, but the one that he likes. P3 gets B1 L of 1.
Then player 2 gets to choose from a two simplex.
Nay, that is not what is happening. So, all I am saying is there exists a colorful triangle. According to that colorful triangle, I just take that extract out. It is also a simplex. Therefore, it is a convex hull of some V1 to Vn vertices. The whole thing is a n minus 1 simplex. This is also this colorful, fully colored object that Sperner guarantees me. It is also an n minus 1 simplex. In my example, where n is equal to 3, this is a triangle. Okay, all right. So, therefore, when this is, so I am basically taking those vertices that, let us call this V1, V2, V3. Okay, and I am calling this, I am just looking into this triangle. So, let us draw this a little bit bigger. So, what is it? Green, purple and pink. Yes, V1 is colored 1. Okay. So, basically the coloring basically says this is the player whose preference I am going to be looking at. If I were to partition this cake from his from their perspective, okay, that way. So, this is player 1, this is player 2, this is player 3. Okay. Now, as we said, each of them has a labeling associated with them. Okay. Okay. First and foremost, let us say why is this L function an injective function? It uses all 3 colors. First and foremost, yes, it is fully labeled. Therefore, by fully labeled means it is a colorful object. So, it means it takes all the 3 different colors. Okay. Now, the question is why is this? So, do you see why this labeling is an bijective, it is a permutation, meaning L2 and L3 can't be the same. Yes. So, okay, let us take this thing. Can L2 and L3 be same?
Then endpoints are colored with n minus 1.
Why? Yes, correct. So, the color is repeated. That cannot happen. By definition, it is a colorful, it is a fully labeled simplex. So, means all 3 colors are used, correct? Okay. So, all 3 colors are used. The object itself has 3 vertices, right. So, each of those vertex must have a distinct label. Okay. So, this is important. So, it means when L1 is saying, when L1, if this is say something I, this is J, then this is K, and they must all be different. Okay. This is why in this example, I said, okay, the first person may be pointing to the first slice, second person is pointing to the second slice, right. The point is, but still the first and the second slice might have some overlap, correct, because what the slicing in the second player with respect to the second player's coordinate has no relationship with the slicing with respect to the first player's coordinate, and they might be overlaps. Okay. This was the problem here that I am trying to mitigate by saying that now I am actually going to do the assignment. I split the cake like this. This is the sort of the end point of this is x11. Okay. So, V1's coordinate is this. Okay. This is x21, okay, and this is x31. So, this is split. Now, I am going to say, now remember that L is a permutation. L, function L, when sort of restricted to delta star, is a permutation, one to one, this thing, bijective, whatever you want to call it, it is a permutation, right. Okay. This is why whatever is the L value of the player 1 is different from the L value of player 2 and different from the L value of player 3. So, in this slice I give whichever slice, this is like the slice 1, this is slice 2, slice 3. I give people based on whatever their favorite index is. So, let me just write down. Assignment PI gets, I am writing this 1 just to say that this slicing has happened from the perspective of player 1 of V1, okay, that is what this means, L of I. See if you understand this. Okay, those of you who are on this thing, let me know if this B1 is, I am saying this B1 because to say that the slicing has happened from the player 1's perspective, and L I is basically player 1 gets whichever slice that corresponds to the labeling of his vertex, player 2 gets the slice that corresponds to the labeling of his vertex, and player 3 gets this. So, potentially it could be this is for player 1, this is for player 2, this is for player 3, or some other way, but this is a permutation. It can't be that both of them are pointing to, two players are pointing to the same slice. Okay. All right, think about this, and if you do not follow you can later on ask me. Now, the question is, so given that I did not get to give them the slice that each one would have absolutely loved the most, this would have been the slicing done from the perspective of player I and giving him the favorite piece. This did not happen, instead I gave the slicing based on player 1's perspective. The main crux of the argument is this subdivision is very small, meaning it has small diameter, means all these points are very close together. Therefore, even if player 1 gets, player 1 always gets his favorite because the whole thing has happened with respect to him. So, even though player 2 got this slice in value cannot be too far from what would have been this slice when I place I equal to 2. This would have been his ideal slice, this slicing done with respect to his preference and his favorite slice given to him from there. The value he has, mu of 2 applied to this, is not far from mu of 2 applied to this slice, okay? And that happens because the end point of this slice, this leftmost endpoint and the rightmost endpoint, is not too far from the leftmost endpoint of this guy, of this slice, and the rightmost endpoint of this, right. This is also an interval, no, in 0 and 1. So, that is what basically if I could have done this, it would have been an absolutely, it would have been a better, potentially better this thing, but this will at least give me some guaranteed NV free allocation, okay. Because the idea is this is not far from what has been assigned to this, okay. For each player, the evaluation on the in his favorite slice is not too far from the valuation he gets by getting the slice that he is given, okay. That is the idea.
Because distance between any 2 points in the triangle is at most gamma.
Yes, that is true. Now, can you tell me what would be the distance between the endpoints? The endpoints of these slices. See, each of these let us take this as a slice. This is the left hand point, this is the right hand point. Each of the xi's, if I compare two slices wherever they are in space, each of these xi values in the two coordinates, this x11 and this thing, the distance between this value and this is basically eta, correct, because the whole thing is it's no triangle has distance more than in any the subdivision being eta bounded as a diameter means within this there are no 2 points that are at a distance more than eta. Yeah. So, wait, so at the very least it means this coordinate and this the first coordinates of the 2 points can only vary at the value eta. Now, when I create the slice, each slice contains at most n points. So, the left hand end point of any slice differs from the left hand end point of another slice by at most eta n, correct. So, distance of end points this is true about any slice to let us say whatever j prime is at most eta n, okay, all right. So, now can you tell me how do I bring the proof to conclusion, like how do I wrap up? We are very close. Basically, we use the definition of continuity. We know that f the mu function, the mu j function was defined with respect to mu j of an interval a comma b was f j b minus f j of a, right, and these f functions are continuous. Now, we also have the fact that we are working on a real line. So, these functions are basically, so the real line is compact. So, these functions are uniformly continuous, okay. So, that is a stronger notion of continuity which sort of the definition of which we use here. Now, the main okay. So, what is the definition by strictly speaking? I mean, this is the definition of continuity. I mean, you might as well take equivalent and real line of applied to So, player 1 is anyways happy. So, let us say we are going to argue about player 2. Okay. So, let us say arguing about, what are we arguing? That P2 is epsilon NV free. Okay. So, I am going to apply the satisfaction function value of player 2. So, apply to F2 gives me what? For all, tell me what should, what am I trying to, at least the guy, those of you who are able to see these definitions and so on. Yes, let us take for all epsilon by 2 maybe. For yeah, for all epsilon 0 there exists a delta less than 0, right, such that what, for all points, what do I do, maybe t, I do not want to a b, maybe t and t prime, this set 0 1 if t minus t prime is less than delta implies correct F2. I am just going to the same argument applies for everything, F2 minus F2 t prime is less than, okay. We will take epsilon by 2 and so on, so that we can do this, correct. Okay. So, this just means that if the points are close, their f value can't be too far. Okay. So, now setting, so what do you think is the right choice of delta? Yeah, delta is basically this, no? This is the distance of the endpoints. The f function will be applied to the endpoints. So, the distance of the endpoints I just showed is at most eta n. Distance of the endpoints of the slices, correct? Setting delta this thing and then applying this definition to this f2 functions of the corresponding this thing. What do I get? Quickly. So, see this is becoming a bit cumbersome. So, T will have whatever the endpoint we have expressed here of the slices, the summation of the xi's and so on and so forth. Okay. So, I am not writing it this way. So, what am I going to try to say? I am going to try to say the left hand side. So, this is the breakdown from the perspective of this is B21, B22, this is B23, okay, and this is, let us say, from the perspective of player 1, this is different. Okay. So, this is B11, this is B12, sorry, okay. So, this is, let us say, this is label of player 2. So, his actual favorite is this, but he is going to be given this space. How far is this point from this point? How far is this point from this point? They are both bounded by eta n, right. So, therefore, the continuity of the function f applied to these endpoints, the distance f applied to here minus f applied to here is also very small. The f applied to here, meaning f of 2 applied to here, and f these, the differences between these 2 points, right, the f value is also small. Now, we know that the mu2 function is basically mu2 of t comma t prime is nothing but f of 2, yeah, the larger this thing minus f of this. Okay. So, what we can say is this, just this basic application of this. Therefore, mu 2, what should I write here? What is the condition that I need? The different, so this would be the piece, the actual satisfaction player 2 would get if it got from its is this thing. This thing this is how much?
This should be at most epsilon.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So, basically I mean, okay, this we should take this to be 4 because we need a 2 of this and so on. Okay, some function of epsilon. These things are like some half or whatever to 4th and so on. Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Eta, like we want epsilon say NV free division, so epsilon is given.
Yeah. So, I am saying what I am trying to say is, if eta is fixed, what should epsilon's relationship with eta be? No, in this analysis what we are trying to establish is, if this is the quality of subdivision we get, this would be the type of NV, this sort of thing, right. This would be some function of, see that delta is there and all those sorts of things, right. These are the part of the construction of this thing. Now, once you know I want 1/10th or 1,000th NV free, then you basically backtrack and set the eta correctly, so that you arrive at that level of NV freeness. Okay. All right. So, this is absolute, and now what is that all? One little bit is left. Why should epsilon be eta n? See, this is just saying how far are the, see the f function are applied to the endpoints of the slices. f function basically captures my level of satisfaction, or rather my level of envy freeness, right. But the continuity of f function means that if the values on the points on which your are close, then the f values can't be too far, correct. That is the idea. So, we said the endpoints are really not far, they are at most this. The delta bounds this thing, right. Of course, I can switch, but you have to see the what is the order. We are saying for all epsilon, for any epsilon greater than 0, there exists some delta such that if the points are this close, then the f values can't be more than epsilon distance far.
And here the f is like linear only, so epsilon and delta in this case should be same.
What do you mean linear?
Like it's just different.
No, f could be applied, yeah. So, this is the thing that
Mu is different.
yes, so mu is here is fj, the endpoints of this slice, minus fj, like the two endpoints, the rightmost endpoints minus the leftmost endpoint, right. So, fj, mu is a probability measure, but I mean fj is I do not know like how it is, all I know is it is sort of continuous. I do not actually know how it, like what the point, how f assigns the point, how it assigns the values on any point, okay. Alright, so now interesting, is it done then? Okay, no, wait, sorry, okay, I am going to erase this, okay. So, to prove that this is actually an epsilon envy free division, okay. Now, if I see these points in space, okay, now notice I know B2 L2 is at least as much as mu 2 B1 L2. This is literally, this is the favorite piece of layer 2. No other piece can be strictly more than that. This is the mu. This is the mu function of that, because that was the definition of the favorite piece and labeling and so on and so forth. This is just from definition. You're very sleepy, but okay. This is from definition, right? Okay. Now let's see what are the. Now I'm going to just apply a simple triangle inequality. So, okay, when I say minus here, I am obviously talking about distance from these points. The issue is that because we are talking in a real line, so minus basically means distance measure, right? Like, okay, how far the points are and so on. So, mu 2 1 L 2, this is mu 2 B1 sorry B2 phi 2 L2 sorry. This is let us say less than epsilon. This is एक मिनट. Okay. So player 2 likes this space more than this. Okay. Let's say k maybe for any k. Something, because this is why. Okay, wait. This is T are the endpoints of this is fine. This is how I get this. Take this thing, I think it should be epsilon by 2 because I need 2 of this. Therefore, okay, yeah. So this, the distance between this, the one that is given to him, and okay, right. So therefore, basically we are done here only. Okay, so the proof I wrote down for myself involves like arguing for every. Okay, we don't need this. We don't need this. Sorry. So we fixed for player. We are arguing for player 2. Basically, what happens is this this thing that we get will be shown for any player 2, for instead of player 2 with respect to any player t vis-a-vis what he gets from the slicing of player 1. So this is his favorite piece. He is at most epsilon by, I think this is, should be epsilon by 4, and then we have add this up to epsilon by 2. That should be enough, but okay, something less than epsilon. And therefore, and we know that this slice is at most this, right. So this is his favorite piece with respect to his slicing, and this is cannot be more than the point is correct. Sorry, I'm sorry, just wait. Let me write it this way. Sorry, correct. This is by, see, when I do the slicing from the player 2's perspective, the label he gets is the one that is his favorite. No, nothing else can be better. K is any other value other than this label. I write greater than equal to because it is potentially possible that two slices have exactly equal value for him, but it can't be less. Okay? This is the slicing done for this. I do not really have a guarantee. This definition only says if the slicing is done from player 2's perspective, the labeled piece for himself is better than any other this thing. The definition does not actually tell me anything about how this thing compares to some slice from player 1's perspective. That we infer from the continuity. So, what we are saying here is if the slicing were done from player 1's perspective, then the value that the slice L2 gives to player 2 is at most epsilon by 2 far away from the value he would get from his ideal piece. Now, this less than equal to epsilon by 2 means it is possible that this is actually strictly more than this. Okay? But this is where I am now going to apply triangle inequality. This is this. Yeah. This now says this is less than epsilon, this is something strictly less, let us say less than equal. Therefore, the distance from this can only be this plus this, correct? Distance from this to this by triangle inequality is at most the distance, which is the distance epsilon, plus whatever non-zero distance this is. Therefore, this distance is at most bounded by some epsilon plus whatever this is. Okay? It is something strictly less than epsilon. So, if I have this, then I am going to get strictly less. This is epsilon by 2, this is something non-zero or maybe a 0 quantity. So, this is strictly less than epsilon. Okay? So, this gives me the property that no matter what piece this guy gets from B1 the player 1 slice, as long he gets the one that is indexed, cannot be too far from his favorite piece, that is this thing, from any piece that he gets from his when the slicing is done from player 2's perspective, and therefore cannot be too far from the slicing done when he actually gets the piece that he actually wants. Okay? So, this is it. Okay. This again took longer than I expected, but think about this. If you have any questions, please let me know. We can have a longer session during the weekend. Okay? I will just schedule something and we can talk about it. Okay, I hope it is clear that the player 2 that I argued against player 1, the same argument applies for any other player, right, because everybody's labeling was done in a way that sort of this clearly creates a partition when I give the cake with respect to player 1's piece, and the same argument that we did for player 2 will work for this. You just have to deal with some indices and so on. Okay, so now we will move on to the portion which is auctions. Okay. So, this serves as, let us say, the first topic in non-cooperative games. So, a non-cooperative game is one where you are inherently sort of competing against the other, you are not cooperating with other people. Now, situations where you do cooperate with other people, one can capture that also as non-cooperative games, but okay, we will make a distinction for this course. Over here we are like trying to do the best we can for ourselves, that is the situation. Okay. Right, auctions. Okay, I have half an hour, but we can do this part of the auction at least. So, auctions, so what is an auction? Anybody has any idea? Like simply stated, what is an auction? It is a mechanism to buy or sell, right, but it is sort of different from opening a shop and having items and waiting for buyers to come and buy. Yes, and that is one thing. It is almost like I take my stuff in front of everybody, whoever is interested. Yeah, so that is why it is not a first come first serve. It is like all the interested buyers are already present, and now the items that I am willing to sell, now I am basically somehow propositioning people to give me the what price they are willing to buy the item for, correct. Now, how I get that information and who I assign the item to, that might differ from auction to auction. correct. But the idea is all the sellers buyers are there, the seller or the sellers come to the market, the items are available, and somehow people express their interest in buying the item. Now, expressing interest in buying the item means it is not just enough to say I want this item, but they have to state a price at which they are willing to procure the item. Okay. Now, different auctions can have very many different complex rules, like the maybe I start with some bid and then later on I can change the bid, go higher or lower, and so on. So, those are essential details that differ from situation to situation, but at least the basic framework of an auction is clear, which is sort of different from, let us say, a shop front where people get served on a first come first served basis, right. Okay. Now, suppose now we will assume the simplest kind of auction, okay, single item sealed bid. So, what is a sealed bid? It is you have one item on sealed bid. So, there is only one item on cell that is going to be maybe not X. Object O. So, and it is a simultaneous, let us say this, it is sort of, it kind of makes this point moot because it is a sealed bid. Everybody submits their bid in, let us say, a sealed envelope, okay, how much they are willing to pay for this item, that is what a sealed bid means. Now, the goal of the auctioneer or whoever is selling the item is what does he have to decide? Whom to give the item to and at what price, correct, right. Whom to allocate. So, I want to reuse some of the terms that we used before. Whom to allocate the item, allocate O, and at what price. Agreed? Yes. Now, when I see the object, I have some idea of how much it is valuable for me. It is game theory, people are rational agents, they have a notion of how much this item is valuable for me, right. Now, that valuation might vary from people to people, yes. So, this thing agents, again there are n agents, have valuation that is private. Okay. What they bid may or may not be related to this information, right. This is what they are expressing intent to the auctioneer, and this is what they hold privately. Tell me, should there be a relationship between VI and BI, which is the bid, valuation and bid? What do you think a person should do? So, now first and foremost, his bidding could very well depend on how this item will be allocated and what price, right. So, let us take the most obvious thing. I am a seller, I want to make a profit, right. So, I think that I am going to assign the item to the person who bids the highest, correct. Now, then the pro sort of thinking comes in, which is that the people who are bidding, for them they have some valuation. A person might think, okay, this item actually means a lot to me, so I could potentially bid high, right, and I would get this item, because if I am the highest bidder, I am going to get the highest item, and suppose the price is going to be whatever the highest bid is, that is the price at which the item will be assigned to the highest bidder. Okay. This is what is called the first price auction. Okay. So, allocate to highest bidder his bid value. Okay. This is this thing. Now, notice something, this is an economic imperative where we assume while they have this valuation, this agent's utility is defined as his true value, how much the object actually means to him, minus the price he pays to obtain the item. It is like if you go to a market, this particular object means a whole lot to you for whatever reason. Maybe you are willing to going to sell it again, or you are going to buy it for your own sort of joy and so on, right. The price you pay, the difference is basically the utility, right. If the price is much lower than VI, then it means, oh, I got a great deal, is it not?
It's in some sense some kind of profit.
Yes, the utility is a profit, no idea of a profit, except the word profit is something we reserve for other things where you are basically selling, that thing is seen as a profit. Like when you are trying to, as a from the seller's perspective, it is like a profit if I can sell it at a price higher than what I expected and so on and so forth. So, we do not use the word profit, we basically use the word utility. So, this is the utility, right. This is why this is the utility, it is like because of a standard experience or idea of how economic situations happen, that people value an item a certain way and the price they pay, the differences describes their utility. Okay. Higher this value, higher utility item it is. Look, the precise values of VI and P do not matter, what matters is their difference, that is the key thing here. Okay. If I pay more than I value this item, that is a definite loss or a negative utility situation. It means I really overpaid for this item. This item simply does not mean to me, I paid more than it means to me, correct? All right. So, allocate to highest bidder at his bid. So, if a person actually bids his honest valuation and he is the highest bidder, then he basically gets what? What is his utility then? Yes, correct. And those who did not buy it, their utility is 0 because they did not pay any price also, right. Okay. Price P if like this means that if actually he buys, okay. Otherwise 0 if not paid, okay. Okay. This is something to keep in mind. If I did not pay anything to opt it, then my utility is 0. So, yes, by bidding truthfully, the value the seller would basically get a 0 utility thing. So, what does it mean? If I do not get the item, I have 0 utility. I got the item because it means I am a highest bidder and I bid truthfully, then also my utility is 0. That is kind of a weird situation, right? Right. So, therefore, naturally a bidder can think, well, maybe I do not want to bid as high as my value, because at the end of the day if I win the item, it should be at a lower price than my actual valuation, otherwise my utility cannot be more than 0, correct. So, there is an incentive to downbid, to meaning bid at a lower value. Is this clear? Allocate highest. So, if Pi wins, utility is 0, okay. Pi wins, so when I say Pi wins, I mean if players are, think about it, if players bid honestly, and I wins, utility of I is 0, right, because he bid VI, which is his true valuation. Honestly means that is VI is equal to BI. He is actually bidding his true value minus PI, because he is going to be assigned the item at the value he bids, this is bi, correct. So, this is 0, right. This cannot be an ideal situation when you are winning and this thing. So, this is why players have incentive to. So, now the point is it's a very confusing situation. I have an incentive to downbid, but I also want the item. If I go very low, I may not get the item, somebody else will outbid me, right. My valuation was this high, if I go this low, somebody in the middle can bid and get the item. When I know I really, if this person wins at this price, to try to, this was my VI, I bid BI here, somebody bids BJ here, so they win. Problem is, I really could have bid this much higher and still made a profit. So, how do I reason as a player, as an agent, how do I reason about how to bid? If I bid VI equal to BI, that is a 0 utility value. I want to bid low, but how much low should I bid so that I still get the item, right, at a positive utility. This is the idea that this first price auction, it's hard to know what to bid, as opposed to now I tell you, suppose first I do second price auction, you tell me is there a significant or any kind of a difference. Okay. Again allocate to highest bidder. Okay. But at price at second highest bid price. This means that I am going to give the item to the person who bid the highest, but the price he will pay is not his bid, but the second highest bid. Okay. So, if there are multiple people who are bidding at the same price, you have, there is some tie breaking mechanism and so on and so forth, okay, because there is only one item. How is this different? How is second price different from first price auction? Do I still have this problem? Like, how should the players now think about this auction? Why?
They will anyway get the utility greater because they are going to pay the second.
Yes, this situation now is sort of automatically guaranteed. I bid the highest, if I am the highest, fine, means nobody else values the item as much as me, great. But see, I am not actually paying VI. If I were to made to pay BI the same value as this, then I would make no utility, I would have 0 utility, but I am paying the second highest bid. So, my now utility, if this is the second highest, let us say this is now my utility. Correct? Now, everybody now realizes I can bid honestly. I am always, let us assume that no two people are going to bid exactly the same. Okay, let us assume this. So, as long as I bid honestly, one or two things can happen. Either I do not get the item because somebody else bid higher than me, which is fine, I get utility 0. But if I do get the item, I have a strictly more than 0 utility, because I am paying only the second highest price, second highest bid. Okay. This is this famous Vickery auction. Very simple tweaking of this thing, right. So, now either a player does not win or does not get the item, let us say, is sort of standard to say win, because it is like competition term. So, ui is 0, otherwise utility is strictly greater than Vi minus bid max of I j not equal to I, right, all other people. So, which is greater than 0, right. Okay. So,
This is kind of cooperative strategy.
why? I did not have to cooperate with anybody, I just bid my honest bid. There is no cooperation here, right. Everybody is submitting a sealed bid auction, sealed bid, bid, and the idea is that nobody is colluding. See, if some people were colluding, if they would discuss among each other, right, they could actually really get the price to be low. But now we are assuming, so there are, we will talk about collusion like strategic behavior. What this second price auction says is, first and foremost, let us revisit the idea, why am I colluding with other people? Because I want to maximize my utility. I am a selfish player at the ultimately, I want to maximize my utility. We are in that frame of mind. This is where the non-cooperativeness comes in. It is inherent, I want to maximize my utility. Now, I could collude with people if somehow that would raise my utility somehow. Okay? The point is that the second price auction tells you, you do not have to collude with anybody. Just bid your true valuation. You will either get the item or not. If you do not get the item, fine, your utility is 0. Even previously when you did not get the item, your utility was still 0. So, nothing has changed. However, unlike the first price auction, here if you do win the item, your utility is strictly greater than 0. That is why there is no need to collude with anybody. Okay? This is the thing, there is no need to collude with anybody, and you honestly can bid your true price, because you are going to pay only something less. Okay? All right.
Are we guaranteed that VA is always greater than VA?
Tell me, does it ever make sense to bid, okay, let us say, does it ever make sense to bid more than your true valuation? I said it before, but let us revisit the idea. See, again, if you do not win the item, it is 0, nothing happened. But suppose you end up winning the item.
It is negative.
Yes, suppose you end up winning the item, you are going to have to pay more money than you think the item is worth. Therefore, it never a good idea, let us say, to pay it to. So, once we do this, we may assume, right, that BI can never be greater than VI because of this thing, correct, for all age. Okay. All right. So, see this so any questions so far? No, right? Okay. Therefore, okay, let me write this. The properties I can extract from here. Every player I has this thing that their utility is non-negative, correct? Another property by honest bidding, like stating your true valuation, can I say that this is actually the best possible strategy I can take no matter what others are doing. In other words, does this maximize, let me write, maximizes utility of every player irrespective of what others are bidding. Actually, not just what others are bidding, what other valuation wait what irrespective of other player. Sorry. Yes, we just now argued this. Yes, this is properties are 1 and 2. So, this is obviously true, but the question is the property to see, it is a bit more nuanced. This is guaranteed okay by the way that you will always have to pay the second that a person has to only pay a bid which is less than his, right. Property 2 is saying that you have the satisfaction of knowing, it is like a no regret kind of a situation, that there is nothing else I could have done which would have given me a higher utility. Why is this? You can look at this diagram and say, is my question clear, guys? So, property 1 is true obviously from this thing. Question is property 2, this is what we think of as a regret free mechanism. I know that there is nothing else I could have done. If this is true, then I know there is nothing else I could have done to increase my utility.
The utility would be anyway maximum of 0 and the difference of utility minus the second highest bid.
Okay, that is for the person who wins.
For the person who wins, irrespective of whatever price.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Let's. So there are two people. Okay. Somebody who wins and others who don't win. Somebody who is winning, he is already getting some non-zero utility. Correct. Let's think. Could he have done something different? First, we will argue for him, and then we will argue for the people who did not win. So the person who is winning, he is getting the item. The question is, could he have increased his utility? Right. The point is, he could have bid less than this, but he must have had to remain above the second highest bid, right. Otherwise, the moment he falls below the second, he is no longer getting the item. So, he goes from a situation which is positive utility to now not winning the item and therefore zero utility, correct. So, he can come down, but there is a natural cap on how much he can come down, the second highest bid. Now, but what did he actually lose by bidding this much? Even if he had bid somewhere in the middle, he still would be paying the second highest bid, correct? Yes, and the utility, therefore, the utility function will remain unchanged. No matter what he bids in this range, his actual true valuation and the second highest bid, his utility does not change. So, this at least gets him the maximum utility possible. Now, those who did not win, correct? If they bid honestly, their bid value was actually less than the second highest bid. If they had, now let us think of it, let us take K, okay? This is the losing player. Well, if how much could they have increased so that their utility would have been higher? That is the situation, that is what we are arguing, right. Could they have bid more? If they had bid less, nothing again changes. They are not winning the item now, they would not be winning the item then. Question is, so could they have increased their bid, like bid something more than V of K, right, to get the to have a change in the only time their utility can change is if they are now suddenly winning. But for them to win, they would have to clear the threshold of what is currently the second highest bid. But then they are overpaying so much. This is their actual true valuation and they are paying this much extra. So, their actual utility is negative.
In case they win.
Huh?
In case they win.
Yes. Therefore, there is no incentive, there is no good reason why they should increase their bid from what they are currently bidding, which is a true valuation. Correct? Is this clear? So, this is why, this is what this property 2 means, that people could not have done anything else to get a strictly better utility. Player who wins as well as the players who do not win.
And there are no intention to harm the winner.
How would they harm the winner?
Like they increase, like cross their utility, but just enough so that the winner.
But then if you cross the utility, you, the only way you can harm the player, you mean I am going to bid in a way that I remain the second highest bid, right. So, I do not win, but I am making the other person pay more, that is what I am saying. But for that I need to know exactly where that guy is, what is the difference. That information is unknown, because it is a sealed bid system. So, there is no price, like I am not discovering the valuation this thing, and these are privately held information, this is not publicly known. So, if I try to, so while we are not talking about harming other people now, because right now I am only currently thinking about maximizing my utility, but there are situations where we do think of strategic behavior, where the goal might not necessarily be to get a better outcome for me, but to harm somebody. Okay. But in this case, that is not what we were studying, but even if I wanted to study, I would actually, given that this second bid, second price auction is the mechanism being used, then I would actually have to know this unknown. I know my true bid, but I do not know what the winning bid will be. So, this is like this is a numbers on a real line, that infinite possibilities, correct. So, this mechanism has this beautiful thing, which is that all this information is unknown to the auctioneer before the auction happens, as well as to the bidders, other than what is their valuation, and somehow the design of the mechanism ensures that these two properties hold. So, the first property says you can safely participate in the auction and bid honestly. Second price says if you bid honestly, this is at least the best that can happen for you. Okay. So, these two aspects are what, when a mechanism has these two properties, we call this property 1 and 2, DSIC, dominant strategy incentive compatible. Okay. Dominant strategy Okay. So, this is a definition. Let us just pour a little bit towards what this definition means. So, we saw weeks ago at the very beginning some simple games where one of them had a dominant strategy, that prisoner's dilemma, while the other games did not have a dominant strategy. What is the definition of dominant strategy? Precisely this thing, no matter what others are doing, this is the best strategy I can adopt. Correct? That is the thing. So, here this property 1 and 2 together imply that bidding truthfully is people's dominant strategy. Okay? And the dominant strategy is compatible with their incentive, which is to maximize their utility. Okay? Dominant strategy, incentive compatible, that is the thing. The incentive here is to maximize utility from a buyer's perspective, and the dominant strategy, this thing, okay, honest bidding is compatible with my incentive to maximize this thing. Okay. All right. So, now this brings us nicely to a point where I guess we can stop now and we will continue tomorrow, which is that we try to, using Vickery as a template, we will try to design auctions where these properties are guaranteed, like the mechanism which has these two properties and therefore is DSIC. Okay. Now, and we will see that whether it is possible or not. So, for single item case, we know this Vickery itself is this thing, right. So, now the question is, what other essential properties we might want from an auction? One is this. Okay, tell me something. Do you see that a person who is actually the auction? So, all we have been talking about is from the bidder's perspective, like how should I participate in the auction? The people who are holding the auction, they have some objective, and the objectives can be several different. One thing might be to maximize profit, which is what happens like these. You may have seen this very the art world, where these Picasso paintings, Van Gogh, the Italian masters, sometimes Leonardo da Vinci, his painting when they came out, I mean it is remarkable how much money people are willing to pay to procure this, right. Okay. Sometimes, by the way, these artworks can be sold privately also, like I am a seller, I have an artwork, I know somebody who is willing to pay a very high price and I buy it. But what happens in these sorts of situations is, like as a seller, I want a profit, and I do not really know who is willing to pay how much money. Privately, I can only make this much inquiries, but you put people in sort of a competitive this thing, and there are people, high value art collectors and so on, prices can dramatically rise. So, look at historical data about how art, a particular kind of art from a particular period is selling. These Sotheby's and Christie's, these auction houses, they have these cutoffs that we will only sell the item at a price higher than this, but sometimes the price goes dramatically high, like it shocks everybody. That sort of thing can only sort of happen in an auction kind scenario, where people are seeing that others are raising their bids, I also raise that kind of thing. Okay. Now, so that is like let us think of it revenue maximizing, where I want as a seller to maximize my value of the item. There can be other kinds of auction, like the kind that government holds, about spectrum auction, like broadcasting rights, coal auction. Many years ago, there was a huge controversy about how government was giving out coal auction. So, it is like mining rights. In countries like Norway, for example, there is a huge industry pertaining to fishing rights. So, for private companies with fishing tankers and the companies who specialize in fishing and selling and so on, they bid for the right to fish in certain coastal locations and so on. So, the government, and this is a huge revenue generator for the government. So, the government is the object that is on sale is this fishing license. Now, here of course, the government wants to earn a profit, but this is also an essential utility service, in the sense that somebody has to fish in order to maintain the the aquatic marine life, the sort of balance of it. There is a huge marketplace where people want to buy fish and so on and so forth. So, if the government holds out for a very high price, there might be very few takers in the market, and therefore, the market suffers. The broadcasting rights, like 4G, 5G broadcasting rights, government wants to provide high level connectivity to everybody in the country. It is a very technologically it is a very expensive infrastructure. So, the government does not want to do it themselves. There are private companies who are more than happy to do it, invest the money to develop this infrastructure and provide. So, and they will earn huge profit from the market. Government wants a share of the profit, but at the same time it is also sort of counterbalancing. If they again ask for a very high price, the private companies will say it is not profitable for me to provide this service at this price. So, they leave this. Then who will suffer? The people who do not get this. Okay. So, sometimes the objective is not to give to the highest bidder per se, but to give to a bidder who values the item the most. The idea behind this is an economics, the perspective comes from economics. The idea is the person who values the item the most is likely to best utilize it. Therefore, just as we think profit maximization is a worthy goal in an auction scenario, welfare maximization is also a equally worthy goal, right, from the point of view of the auctioneer. Okay. So, from tomorrow we will start with this idea, that when the goal is to give the allocate the item or items to people who value it the most. Now, and if the government or the auctioneer just comes and asks who values it the most, who values it does not make sense. People, everybody will say that okay, maybe it is not clear how people would answer and so on, right. So, how people value the item basically is gauged by how they bid for the item. Based on this idea, if you value the item the most, you are bidding the most, because the mechanism gives you these guarantees. So, when you see the bidders, you see the highest bid, you know this person values the most, because he has bid honestly. So, you give this item to that person. So, the second, both the second highest bid, second price auction ensures this property, that you give it to the person who values the most. We will try to see in more complex scenarios, right, how to ensure that this happens, that you give the items to the people who value it the most, and if such a thing is even possible, the moment we go beyond one item. Okay. So, we will start from there, and yes, I am going to post this thing, or I will send you all an email with some slides for using the definitions. Okay. All right.